Welcome everyone to Monday Morning Morons for October 7th, 2019. This week, let's begin with misunderstanding and overreaction. Judge who gave convicted murderer Amber Guyger a Bible is accused of bridging the church-state divide. Amber Guyger's trial sparked protests over policing, but what happened after is now raising complaints over the U.S. Constitution's separation of church and state. The Freedom from Religion Foundation filed a complaint Thursday against Judge Tammy Kemp for giving the woman convicted of killing her neighbor a Bible while in the courtroom. The foundation said Kemp's proselytizing actions overstepped judicial authority and has asked the Texas State Commission on Judicial Conduct to investigate. Now, I'm sure there are going to be plenty of you who disagree with me here, and that's fine. I don't really want an audience of sycophants anyway. But I've always had a problem with this particular organization for one simple, fundamental reason, and their name says it all. Freedom from religion is not a right. It is not what the First Amendment guarantees. Let's review so we're all on the same page to start with, huh? The actual amendment reads, in part, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Now, we don't need the rest for this particular discussion because the rest involves other rights. This is the part commonly called the freedom of religion portion, not freedom from religion, for a very good reason. Do you see in there anything that would indicate you have the right not to see or hear anything religious? No. In fact, because the government cannot prohibit the free exercise thereof, they have practically guaranteed that you will be exposed to others practicing or proselytizing or discussing their religion, as they are entitled to do. You do not have a right to demand other people stop practicing their religion just because you don't want to hear it. That's the fundamental problem I have with your organization. You begin all of your arguments from the position of a right that simply doesn't exist. Former Dallas police officer Guyger was sentenced to 10 years in prison, a sentence many have called inadequate, for the murder of Botham Jean, whom she says she fatally shot after she entered his apartment thinking it was her own. At the end of the emotionally charged trial, Kemp gave Guyger a hug and a Bible. While it is acceptable for Kemp to express her faith as a private citizen, the complaint argues she was representing the U.S. government at the time. We, too, believe our criminal justice system needs more compassion from judges and prosecutors. But here, compassion crossed the line into coercion. And there can be few relationships more coercive than a sentencing judge in a criminal trial and a citizen accused and convicted of a crime, the complaint said. You are both correct and incorrect at the same time. I mean, your premises is spot on. A sentencing judge can indeed be quite coercive. However, the trial was over at this point. Finished. Sentencing was handed down already. The case is over and done with. So I would argue that Kemp was not a representative of the government at this time, but had reverted back to being merely a private citizen entitled to her own opinions. Further, the government cannot establish laws respecting an establishment of religion. Sounds a little bizarre to our modern English ears, but through the years, the Supreme Court has clarified. It means they can't establish a national religion or create laws favoring one specific religion over any other. Is that in any way what Kemp was doing here? No. And I don't see any way you could realistically argue that she was without reaching way up into your own ass to pull out some bullshit. I understand the desire to ensure that the First Amendment is respected, and I agree in principle with preventing a theocratic government. But you're reaching here. You're overreacting to a human being expressing compassion for another. This is not a violation of the Constitution or the law, and you're just making a mountain out of a molehill to grab some much-desired attention. Stop it. Next one, Bob. Dartmouth professor calls for mandatory white privilege courses. Mandatory racism class. That is exactly what we need. A Dartmouth College sociology professor called on universities to require students to take courses on white privilege and black history. Dr. Emily Watson argued in a USA Today op-ed that if racial equity is to be an achievable goal, then students should be required to take courses on these topics before they graduate. The professor proceeds to state that she teaches a course on these topics, claiming that the small handful of white students in the class usually learn the most. That's because for the first time in their lives, they begin to look at themselves as members of a racial group, she explains. They understand that being a good person does not make them innocent, but rather they too are implicated in a system of racial dominance. You see it? In her own words, they stop thinking of themselves as individuals or good people and start accepting the racist guilt I want them to feel. You're not teaching, Emily, you're indoctrinating. There's a difference. Walton refers to white blindness, or a state in which racial privilege is invisible, claiming that during the course, her white students awakened to the notion that racism systematically advanced white people while keeping all others down. Awaken to the notion, or as any normal person would call it, believe. They start to believe the utter horse shit I keep telling them. Going further, the professor claims that white blindness is no accident, but that public K-12 schools perpetuate a culture of white blindness by not requiring white students to contend with history in an inclusive, critical way, referencing ethnic studies initiatives taken in a few states. Yeah, the last time I checked, and I'll admit, it's been a long time since I don't have kids, but last I knew, K-12 still taught history classes. And in those history classes, they do cover slavery, specifically America's involvement in it and eventual outlawing of it. So beyond the facts, what exactly is it you would prefer they teach? Fee-fee bullshit? Not good enough because we haven't sufficiently guilted every white person into accepting your new racist narratives? More that she identifies to be problematic is that our contemporary education system teaches white students that they are no more than individuals participating in a meritocratic system where their hard work earns them just rewards. Because that is how you end racism. By reminding everyone that they are individuals, they are responsible for themselves. They are not guilty of anything simply because they were born a certain color. I think we can skip the rest here. You can see where this is going. She's a racist, arguing for mandatory racist training to make more racists. The only difference between her and the 18th century shit she's bitching about is which colored person is born bad. Not only should that kind of teaching not be mandatory, we shouldn't be teaching kids that shit at all. You're perpetuating racism, not fixing it. Moving on. Professor, create anti-racist amendment and Department of Anti-Racism. What a great idea. A government agency to decide who or what is racist. What could possibly go wrong? And let me just take a wild guess who is allowed to work in this new all-powerful agency of yours. A Washington, D.C. professor argued for the creation of an anti-racist amendment, as well as a federal department dedicated to anti-racism. American University history professor Ibram Kendi made his case for the two additions to government in a piece for Politico. The amendment would make unconstitutional racial inequity over a certain threshold, as well as racist ideas by public officials. With racist ideas and public official clearly defined, Kendi wrote in the piece. Clearly defined by whom, might I ask? And racial inequity over a certain threshold simply means you plan to engineer outcomes. Sorry, Chief Racist Officer, but I don't support discrimination in equal opportunity to achieve equal outcomes. The professor, who also serves as the director of American University's Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center, also supported establishing a Department of Anti-Racism, DOA. DOA. What an appropriate name for it, because that's exactly what it is. Dead on arrival. Containing no political appointees, but instead staffed with formally trained experts on racism. Yeah. Pretty much what I expected here. No political appointees, so the people we don't like can never infect our supreme agency with people who may question our methods, motives, or outcomes. We will have a pure echo chamber of formally indoctrinated expert racists deciding who or what we want to declare racist. The DOA would be responsible for pre-clearing all local, state, and federal public policies to ensure they won't yield racial inequity, monitor those policies, investigate private racist policies when racial inequity surfaces, and monitor public officials for expressions of racist ideas, Kendi explained. The DOA would be empowered with discipline tools to wield over and against policymakers and public officials who do not voluntarily change their racist policy and ideas. Dictators. That's all you just said there. This agency you've just created does not answer to the people in any way because they are not elected, nor are they appointed by the people's elected representatives. They do not answer to any elected official or appointed government agency at any level of government. And they have total authority to declare and punish anything and everything that they alone decide is racist. Absolutely no oversight capacity from anyone. No means of challenging anything they declare, no means of appeal. And no one, not even the elected government, is outside their reach. That, my friend, is nothing but a dictator. Perhaps a council of dictators if there's supposed to be more than one person in this agency, but still dictators nonetheless. I hope for all our sakes you never, ever achieve this goal. Because if you do, I can guarantee an actual civil war will follow. Not the usual hyperbolic bullshit we hear about now, but real, blood in the streets, civil war. And no one is going to win when that happens. Toxic time, Bob. Texas mom accused of faking 4-year-old son's medical problems, forcing unneeded feeding tube. A Texas mom was arrested last week on allegations that she faked her 4-year-old son's medical problems, a scheme that involved more than 200 unnecessary doctor visits and more than 70 prescriptions, according to a Monday report. Megan G., 30, was arrested in her Wichita Falls home Wednesday on a felony charge of serious bodily injury to a child, the Fort Worth Star-Telegram reported, citing an arrest warrant affidavit. According to the arrest affidavit, G. took her son to 227 doctor and hospital visits in Wichita and Tarrant County. At one doctor's visit, G allegedly insisted doctors insert a feeding tube into her son because he supposedly wouldn't eat or became sick after eating. Doctors told investigators they inserted the tube based on the symptoms G described, the Star-Telegram reported. According to the affidavit, doctors independent of each other started to suspect G was making up her son's symptoms and filed a report. Child Protective Services reportedly removed the boy from G's custody and placed him with a foster family. In total, G's son was prescribed at least 77 unnecessary medications, the affidavit said. It adds that doctors and investigators suspect G suffers from Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a mental health disorder in which a caregiver makes up illnesses for the person in their care. Online records cited by the Star-Telegram show G was booked in the Wichita County Jail. She was released Thursday on $25,000 bail. It is unclear if she has an attorney. Well, thank the heavens that 277 doctors and hospitals believe women, right? Of course, she eventually stumbled into the waiting jaws of the doubting patriarchy, and now they're going to put all the blame on her when all she was trying to do was make sure the boy got all the proper medical care he needed. On a separate note, anyone else a little bothered by the numbers here? At least 77 different prescriptions for a freaking 4-year-old? I mean, I understand they didn't all come from the same doctor or hospital, and thus they might not have known the boy was already taking something. But seriously, that a frickin' 4-year-old has any chance of being pumped up with that many frickin' drugs is ludicrous, don't you think? Kind of an indictment on the current state of modern medicine in America, if you ask me. Let's wrap it up with something funny, Bob. Alabama woman allegedly tells cops before arrest, "I want this dope tested." Some criminals are just too stupid for their own good. That's it for this week. Remember the social justice mantra: women are victims, men are oppressors, and feminism is just about equality. I'll see you all next time.